Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning from wherever you're joining us from today in the world. My name's Sarah and I'm the Program and Event Manager at the Reactor in Sydney, Australia. Welcome to a Microsoft Reactor Sydney live stream event. Today will be our first Little Learns episode with our regional cloud advocate, Renee Noble. So today's topic will be fishy functions, serverless computing endpoints with Azure Functions, which Renee will go through in more detail with you shortly. Firstly, a bit of background on Renee for whoever's joining us for the first time today for one of her series if you've not before. So Renee is a self-proclaimed Jane of all trades. She's worked in government doing ML and Python backend, full stack in the ed tech startup sector, and dabbles with embedded tech. In her spare time, she leads the Girls Programming Network for women and girls to realize their potential as techies. She's also started a business to help bring exciting coding opportunities to kids and teachers. So today we'll be speaking for about 45 minutes to 50 minutes with 10 minutes for questions at the end. However, do ask us any questions throughout, and between Renee and myself, we will try and answer as many as possible. We'll also share with you the link to the feedback survey with the event code, which is 15864, which we'll share later on in the session in the chat. And if you have time to fill that out, that would be great. And we'll also share with you all links that Renee is going to be speaking about today in her session, and we will drop those in the comment section as we go along. And if there's anything that you've missed from today and would like to reference back, you can do so on our YouTube channel straight after today, and we'll share the link in the chat as well for the on-demand version. But for now, I'll hand the floor over to Renee to begin. So thank you so much, Renee, and over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, excited to be here today to talk to you about Azure Functions. This is actually my first time trying Azure Functions, not right now, but in preparing for this episode. So yeah, I'm really excited to tell you what I've learned and how easy it was to get started. Today, we're going to be following a Microsoft Learn pathway. And this workshop has actually been designed by the amazing Microsoft student team that I get to work with. And this is a workshop that is designed for student ambassadors to be able to run, actually. So you can use this as a demo if you're a student ambassador or one who wants to be one soon. And you can run this yourself to teach to your peers and get those student ambassador points, brownie points, and level up and just really up your skills, up the skills of your peers, and gain confidence by teaching other people. So yeah, there is a resource available for this talk, so that will be shared by Sarah right now in the chat. So you can use that. You can get these slides. They don't have the pictures, but you can add your own pictures. You can add your own flavor. I've added the fishy flavor for today. There are no actual fish going to be co-presenting with me, but you can imagine they're there in spirit. They're the subject matters experts that I'm channeling here. So to do today's workshop, you only need one thing, which is a Microsoft account. So before you embark on this adventure, you should have a Microsoft account and get logged in. And that's all you'll need. So we'll be using Azure today, Microsoft Azure, to do some serverless functions. So what is the goal of today? Well, firstly, to gain some knowledge about what is serverless computing, and then from understanding if it's the right project for you and what the ups and downs of it are, to create a function app in Azure Portal, and then execute functions using triggers. So you can do a HTTP request or set up other ones, and then to be able to monitor and test your function from the Azure Portal and using other tools. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to start off with an introduction to what is serverless computing. Decide if serverless computing is right for your business needs. Exercise on how to create a demo function, just a little baby one, before we get into our one that follows the learn pathway fully. And after that, we're going to make it fishified for our aquarium desires. And then at the end, we've got a little summary and a little knowledge check that's part of the learn module, so we can follow along with that. After all of that, we're going to stay on the line. If you are a student ambassador or you want to be one, please stay on the line, ask questions about how you can deliver this yourself, any questions about delivering content. If you have questions about the material, please feel free to ask them throughout and also at the end. So let's jump to the introduction. So firstly, let's imagine you're working with an IoT, Internet of Things project, where you want to monitor your tropical fish tanks to ensure it's a good climate for your fish to thrive in, really. So we want to use thermometers, pH sensors, who knows what, to make sure it's ideal for your very fancy fish. I don't actually have any fish. I think the cats would try and eat them, but I wish we had some amazing tropical fish like this. So this is my hypothetical dream fish tank. So let's firstly think about, is serverless computing going to be right for you? So firstly, what is serverless computing or serverless compute? You might see these words used kind of almost interchangeably, but not quite. I would say serverless compute is a resource you can get on the cloud, and you want to get some serverless compute resource to do your computing for you. If you see those used interchangeably, they're a bit tricky to know which one to use when, but mostly they can just be used interchangeably. So serverless, you might have heard the word thrown around, and it might sound a little bit tricky, but the thing is there actually are servers. And what this is you can be thinking of it as a function as a service that's managed by, or a microservice hosted on a cloud platform. So the cloud platform is going to run your business logic as functions, and it means by configuring the platform to know where your functions are and what they are, then you don't have to manage all that infrastructure yourself. And that's really useful because that means if you have need to scale it up, the platform like Azure can do it for you. And that means you can save on costs and you save on the effort and understanding of how to do all of that. So it's really easy to get started. All you need to be able to do is write a bit of your own code. So Azure has several ways to build this sort of architecture. Two of the most common ways we're going to approach Azure Logic Apps and Azure Functions. And we're going to learn about Azure Functions in this module. So the summary of that is they are servers. They're just Azure servers, and you don't have to manage those yourself. We're just going to get Azure to do all the hard work for you in terms of having those endpoints, having them live on the internet. And then all you have to say is, when this endpoint gets hit, I want you to do this, Azure, and it's just going to run the code for you. So what is Azure Functions? Well, it's a serverless application platform. It enables developers to host business logic that can be executed without having to provision the infrastructure yourself. So functions provide intrinsic scalability because it's just this little blob of code that can be run however many times on however many cloud computers that you need, and Azure handles all of that for you. And the great thing is that you're only going to get charged for the resources that you use. So Azure is going to scale up to however many copies of these functions you need to be running at once if you have a big peak, and then it's going to scale it back down so you don't have all this unused bandwidth when you don't need it. The great thing about Azure Functions is basically it's a little box you put your code in, and you can write that code in the language of your choice, including things like C#, F#, JavaScript, Python, which is my favorite, PowerShell core. And there's also support for a bunch of package managers like NPM and NuGet if you want to use those. And you can use popular libraries in your business logic as well. So it's just a neat little box you can put all your logic in, and then it's going to handle actually serving that to the internet and making it available. So what are the benefits of a serverless computing solution? Well, basically, it's a great option for hosting business logic in the cloud. With serverless offerings such as Azure Functions, you can write your business logic in a language of your choice, as we said, many I just listed off. You get that automatic scaling, and you don't have to manage servers and make sure they're up and not crashing and things like that. And you'd only get charged for what you use, not having a bunch of unused capacity like you might have if you were running a virtual machine all the time and have to have that server being alive all the time to see if there's anything coming in. So we're going to go through those advantages and disadvantages in a little more detail. So firstly, it avoids over-allocation of infrastructure. So this is talking about scaling up and scaling down. So suppose you provision virtual machines, or VMs as we call them for short, to run your servers and configure them with enough resources to handle your maximum peak. When the load is light, you're potentially paying for infrastructure that you're not using. And serverless computing helps solve that allocation problem by scaling up or scaling down automatically and only billing you for what you're actually going to use. So it's going to save you money, And also it's just going to be easier. So if it's a suitable solution for you, like you don't need the same kind of bandwidth all the time, it's really useful. These are really good solutions for things that are stateless functions. So what stateless means is you don't necessarily need a whole like database or all this other context to handle all the requests that are coming in. So for instance, if someone makes a request from, for example, our aquarium, you can handle it just based on the information that's coming in, and then respond back to the fish tank if that's what you need, or pass it on to another service if that's the direction of flow of the data. So it can be handled, but it doesn't need to go to another service, a database, and have large amounts of processing of other data and other contexts. So that's what Azure Functions is great for, because basically every time you call the function, it creates a little box of compute power, let's say, and it runs your function, and then after that it can get destroyed. So that's how it can be scalable. You can make as many boxes as you want, and then they don't all need to be synced up because they kind of just work independently. So it's really ideal for that. It's not, there are options if you do need state in your logic, but for today we're going with stateless logic and just really easy ways to use the cloud to process information that you have coming in via requests of various kinds. So it's event-driven. So we were just talking about those requests. Functions are event-driven, which means they only run in response to an event, which we call a trigger. So receiving something like an HTTP request or a message being added to a queue, maybe something like your Azure blob getting updated, you can configure those as part of the function definition. This approach simplifies your code by allowing you to declare where the data comes from, so your trigger or your input binding, as we'll talk about, and where that, once it gets processed in your function, where the output goes to. So you just say, this is where it's coming from, that's where it's going to, and you just give it this little inside bit in the middle that does all the processing that you want to do there and then. So you don't need to write code to watch things like queues and blobs and servers to get HTTP requests or hubs or anything. You can just focus on the part that's important to you, actually, which is the business logic, which is the thing that you understand. So for instance, in our example, we're some sort of fish aquarium expert. We care about the fish. We don't actually care about scalability. We don't care about Azure Blob or anything like that. We just want to take care of our fish, and it's going to help us do that. So the other great thing is functions are also a key component of traditional computing environments. So this means that we can go with a serverless solution for now and utilize all of these great features that make it really easy. Like it gets scaled up and scaled down, which it might be ideal for now because you maybe only have occasional peaks, and we can make it do all the work in terms of watching for requests and changes. And then we can, if we need to later, we can actually move to a server-based solution. So imagine we get to a point where our needs change for how we're going, and we actually have a lot of fish tanks. We have like 1,000 fish tanks, let's say, for instance, and they're always sending through data. So we actually have a higher usage that we're having, and it's more constant. So it's not a high and then low for most of the time and high and then low. Something has changed in our business situation, and now we want to have a lot of capacity all the time. I kind of think of this as like having contractors. Sometimes if you're a business, you might hire a contractor to do a particular piece of work. You've got that high load, and then you don't need them, so they go back to the contracting agency. But if you get to a point where you actually have so much work that you need a full-time staff member, it's actually going to be cheaper to employ that full-time staff member rather than having a lot of contractors coming all the time, which are typically more expensive. So those are that's my analogy for thinking about this one. So it can be cheaper, and it's really easy to get set up, and it still leaves options open for going to a serverless option later. But what are some of the downsides of serverless computing? There are a couple of characteristics that might affect your decision if you want to host on something like a serverless compute option. So firstly, execution time. By default, functions have a timeout of 5 minutes. This timeout is configurable to a maximum of 10 minutes. If your function requires more than 10 minutes to execute, you can host it in a virtual machine. As we said before, you might need to manage your own virtual machine to do that. Additionally, if your service is initiated through HTTP requests and you expect the value as a HTTP response, which is what we're going to be doing today, timeout is actually reduced to 2.5 minutes. Finally, there is also an option called durable functions that enables you to orchestrate the execution of multiple functions without any timeout. So there's some options, but basically you're going to need to do your research on what's good for you and your specific needs there. The second characteristic that might make you choose not to go with a serverless option is execution frequency. If you expect your function to be executed continuously by multiple clients, it would be prudent to estimate how much usage you're going to have and calculate the cost of using a serverless option versus a virtual machine that's always running. While scaling, only one function app instance can be created every 10 seconds for up to 200 total instances. So you can only have 200 running at once, and they only kick up every 10 seconds. Keep in mind, each instance can service multiple concurrent executions. So if lots of different people are calling it, then that's all good. So there's no set limit on how much traffic a single instance can handle. And different trigger types have different scaling requirements. So you're going to need to do your research there as well, investigate the limits that will be in place for how often you can call this and how that's going to affect your business needs and your clients or whoever's going to be calling this on your side. So now we've kind of got the ideas of when it might be suitable for us to use a serverless option. We're going to start by doing an exercise. This is just our little baby demo first up. So we're going to go into the Azure portal and learn how to create a function app, which is kind of the little nugget that we can put all our functions in, how to choose the service plan and storage of requirements and everything to get it set up, and then create our functions and test our functions. So first up, we're going to run our code on demand by using a basic function. So I'm going to jump over to here. I'm going to go back to, here we go. Oh, I'm on the wrong slide here. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly run through because we're just following through this this pathway today. So you can see everything we're doing and all this information here on this first introduction slide. We've covered a lot of the stuff that we've covered all the things in the slides that you can learn from here as well. But you can always go back and read later about introduction and how, what our serverless computing is and why you want to use functions. So it's all written here. If you want to share that with somebody, if you want to do it again later. And we're just coming up to here. So this is where we're up to in our Learn module, if you want to follow along with that specifically. I have actually kicked up the sandbox before I came on live, so it would already be ready. So the sandbox is activated. You'll need to activate your sandbox, and we're going to be doing the JavaScript version of this today. So let's go, keep on scrolling down. We're just going to run through this and see what it's got installed for us. So basically, we're going to start by creating a function app. So we've already talked about a bunch of these different options, and we're going to be using our sandbox today. So it actually kind of covers off the service plan that we need to use. But if you want to do this in the future and consider what your options are versus a virtual machine and things, have a read of that. So first up, we're going to go with create a resource. And then we are going to go into here. And as it says, we want to go into the compute resources. And then we can see down here, function app. I'm going to just click create. So as you can see here, I've got concierge subscription, and that's come from having created my sandbox up here. If you haven't got that, you might need to go into here because I wasn't able to see that. And you can go into here and you can switch to your default. So we've got concierge subscription. Let's pop that back close so we can see everything at once. And then in here, it will hopefully have not signed you out like it has signed me out. So let's hang on for a second and hopefully it doesn't make me do some sort of authentication dance. Here we go. Great. We've got our learn module, our resource group created by the concierge subscription from our sandbox, which is great. So now we're going to need to give it a name. I'm going to call mine fish function. I'm going to put my initials. Fish functions. Okay. Our stack we're going to use today is a Node.js stack because we're using the JavaScript option, and you should find something that is near to you. So Australia Southeast, that's what we're going to go with. That's near to here. And that's all we need to do in setting this up. Everything else should be fine. So we're going to go review and create and give it a second, and then we're going to create it. So first things first, we're going to wait for that to start up and deploy our thing. So while we do that, do make sure to ask questions in the chat. Jack's got a question for us. How long does the sandbox take to spin up? Is it quick enough to work along with you? Yeah, it's actually quite quick. So you could probably do it right now, Jack. It would probably only take like a minute to get started up. So, you know, while I'm deploying this, I'm certain that your sandbox is going to spin up in time to follow along too. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure nothing went wrong. But then also it signed me out. So, you know, you never know what you're going to get when you do a live stream. While we wait for that to deploy, we will just jump across to our slides again. Ooh, where did our slides go? Here we go. Okay, so for our first one, following along with the Learn module, we're going to create a queue storage. So when something gets added to a queue, it's going to add something, it's going to trigger our function. And we're just going to do a really basic function. We're not even going to set up the full thing. We just want to see that it's alive and give it a little test. So let's have a look at how it's going. Have you done? Not yet. Okay. Well, please do ask questions in the chat because we're just going to wait just another little minute while this gets ready. We're ready. Let's go. Okay. So next up, we need to go into functions. That's where we're going. Okay. So we go into functions and then we're going to create a function. So the one we're doing for this session, this first little demo, it's going to load up all of our options, and we're going to go with the Azure Queue Storage trigger. So this is going to give us a bunch of demo stuff, like that you can edit all the stuff, but it's just really easy to get started with. So let's create that one, and that's going to spin up our thing shortly. Oh, we have some questions coming in. AppCell, do we create function app directly within app service plan? What's the difference if we create function outside of ASE, which I don't know what ASE stands for. So this is my first time using app services. So I think, what did I do on the first page? That is still getting set up. So why don't we just duplicate that tab and have a look at what our options are? It's going to keep getting to do that. So I guess it's going to keep giving me options to be different people. Okay, there we go. So we went create resource, and then we went for the function app. So I think you can use them in conjunction with other things. Like if you were running a web app service or something, then you could be polling to your function app. But I think this is just the fastest way to get something spun up. And this function app just allows you to have multiple functions inside of it, and then you can configure all of their services and their storage and all those bits together you can do in the config together for like one little bundle. So you could have this as a part of a bigger resource group that had multiple function apps that maybe needed different resources and things like that. Okay, so we've got Babatu, sorry, it's very small on my other screen. Babatunde, that's an awesome name. Can you please show the slide of the project you're currently working on again? Yes, we can certainly do that. I hoped, which I'm not sure. Okay, so yes, let's go back to, maybe Sarah could pop a link in for us. We have And jump to the end. So you can grab all the resources that we're currently working on from either of these sites. So on GitHub, it's got all of the links to everything. And also we've got on my personal website, you've also got all the links. So jump to whichever one of those works for you. Sarah's putting in the chat some links so you can check out those. And there, if you click through, it will have follow the learn pathway, and that will be ready to go for you. Okay, cool. Got lots of people chatting in the chat to each other. So Sayadi is chatting to Jack. I think you have enough time to complete the lab, at least 3 hours or 4. So yeah, so you have the sandbox spins up. I think Jack was just asking how long does it take if you could do it while we're streaming right now. But once it's spun up, you have 4 hours to do everything. So I hope I have answered all the questions we've got going on there. Can we have multiple functions and create a serial dependency between them? Oh, that's an interesting question. As I've said, I'm very new to this, but I think you could absolutely do that because you could just chain the inputs and outputs. So I think that's a great idea to do there. So yeah, doesn't sound like a problem to me. Okay, I hope I have answered your questions. I've done it to the best of my ability, but I'm very excited about all the options. I'm really interested to look more into the options of what we can do here. So, but yes, you do have a limitation of 10 sandboxes a day. So let's jump back in the slides, back in time to where we're going. Here we are. Okay, so there we are. So we've gone with one of our options, and we're going to be setting up our bindings next to tell it how to get something to come into the trigger, which is going to be something is being added to the queue named my queue items. And then what would happen is it would put something out. So this is our output binding, push it out to a table and write it to a table named out table. We're not actually going to configure the table today because that's kind of not the point of this one because we have some more stuff to do, but this is just kind of going to give us an idea of how we can do that. So let's go back to this one here. Okay. Let's jump into code and test. Let's get back to our information here. So let's make sure actually that it's given us a thing to say, where is our URL? That's this one. Let's give it a refresh. So it should give us a URL somewhere. Maybe it's in here. It's hiding from me. Well, I thought it was on this page, but I can't see it. So maybe we need to configure one first. Let's double check. Okay. When the deployment completes, we go to the resource, functions out pane for your escalator function here. So we're doing an escalator one first. That's what the topic of the thing is, of this learn module. Okay, in the function pane, let's jump back. Maybe it's before we get to here, because it was there when I tested this before. So let's go to this overview. Here we go. That's what we want. Okay, we can see that our function app is alive, but we don't have any functions on it yet. So that's good. It's alive. So now we can go to our function spot and we can add our first function, which we've done here. And now we can go into code and test. And we're just going to put in the most basic thing we can to just get it to be alive. So actually, we can just have a look at what's already in here. That's what we're going to do. So scroll across so we can see this. Okay, so we've got here, this is our index.js. This is where you put your function logic. And then we've got our function.json, which is where we put our triggers. So I'm going to grab the code that it's given me here and pop that into there. So it has an input and an output. So now we can actually test this from right within Azure. So I'm going to save it first. I keep forgetting to save things, and then they don't work for some reason. And then we can do test and run. So We can do it with just nothing in here, and it will run. We'll wait for it to run just a second. And then we see that we got a 202 response accepted. So that means we've accepted your trigger. We've accepted the things you've given us. But 202, unlike 200, 200 is your everything's okay, and here's the thing back. Here's your response back. 202 just means, well, we've accepted your thing, but we didn't have anything to give you back. We can't tell you even if you've started processing your thing. It's in the queue probably. But that's going to be the case because we haven't actually configured anything to be given back by our function over here. And we actually haven't configured the table, so it's not going to work anyway. But that's just kind of the idea of, we've now just tested our function and it has triggered it. So the endpoint is active and alive and we can get a response back from it. This just doesn't happen to do anything when it gets our information. But we can also see that it does do some things. So I'm going to give it a name. Actually, we're going to do that in the next part. We're just going to leave that out for a moment. But we can, now that we know it's alive, we have a few things that we can do. One thing is we can add in here some code to do some extra logging. So I'm going to jump in and put this code in here. So you can put anything you wanted in here. I'm just going to make it say hello to us. But you could easily put something in here using context. You can get things out of the context or the MyQ items. You need to look at the documentation to see what's actually in there, but you could get out, you can pass things into here. Oops. You could pass something like name in or whatever you would like. And then you could print those out. So we'll do that in a little while because we're not focusing on MyQ items today. We're going to do HTTP responses and requests. So let's give that a run and see it say hello to us, and we can see how we can just add more stuff to this file here, which is our function, where we can do anything we want. Okay, let's see if it says hello. I forgot to save it. That's classic me. Let's do it again. Let's see if it says hello. Hello. So yeah, we can just put anything in here. And when this function gets run, we actually get past this context, which has different names in the different languages that is supported here, which I'll have another demonstration on one of the slides in a minute. But we can also do things like monitoring our status. So we want to turn on app insights. So we need to set somewhere for this one as well. Never find Australia Southeast in this list. Here we go. We could create that and it'll take a moment to spin up. And that's going to, instead of waiting for that to spin up, we're going to have a look over here because we have, this is what it's going to give you. It's not going to have anything very interesting right now because we're not exactly making a lot of requests, but you'll be able to see over time how many requests are made, how they're getting handled, how long they're taking to get handled, and that's all in there. And as I said, you can get that context, or it's called different things in the different languages. So in C# you can get the log and the log information, and then you get the log and you can log new information to the log, or you can get the context in JavaScript and log new things to that context. And they appear in the log, so you print them out and you can see whatever's happening just as it would print them out on that screen, where it prints out the status of how the app is going. You can put anything you want in there. So now that we've done that, let's go on to making an app that actually has some logic. Because the moment we put, we can make a request, but it doesn't actually do anything. We have some questions. Which template are we using again? So that one was just a demo one. We're going to move on to actually using the HTTP template next, but that one was the Azure Q service. So that's for Hamid there. So Azure Q service was the last one. We're going to do a new one now. So if you're just tuning in, it's not too late to start off. We're going to make a new function inside the same app, function app, which is going to be an HTTP request. So this is the kind, you can make from your web browser. You can use curl to do. We're going to have a few ways of testing them out. So now we're going to go into our escalator themed problem that we are following in the learn pathway. Then we're going to change that up to be a fish version of that. So firstly, we're going to set it up with a new function that's triggered by HTTP request and add our logic for this escalator, which is monitoring the gears of escalators to make sure they don't get too hot. Then we're going to turn that into something based on pH, but you could do it for anything. You could do it for a multiple number of inputs like temperature and pH together, and maybe they have some sort of business logic that you can combine to know if your fish tank's going well. So let's jump back to here. So we're going to go back to here. We're going to create a new function. So we've had our queue trigger, and now we're going to create another HTTP request based one. Okay, here we go, HTTP. Come on, let me create it. We're just going to let it be called that. Could call it our aquarium one, call it whatever you like. Yes, HTTP is very simple. Thanks, Zhao Di. It is super simple, so you should all try it. So follow the lead there. Thanks all for jumping in and giving it a go with me. It's cool. So we've got our new one, a new function. It's HTTP based. It's going to have a slightly different demo code in here. So this is its demo code. We can see in our function here. Oops, let's jump to the next one here. It's going to have all our basics that are covered. So that's the same one. That's our basic function code. And all it does is it gets the name out of something that's passed in. If there is a name, it's going to basically say, hi name, you've triggered the function. And if there isn't a name, it's going to tell you, you've triggered a function, but you should pass in a name. So that's what we've got going on here in these two lines. So this is condensed if statement in JavaScript. That's got two options depending on if there is a name, in fact. So we'll give that a test in a second. We've also got the, make it a little bit bigger. We've also got the bindings here saying there's a HTTP trigger. So if you get a HTTP request, then you're going to start doing the function. And then we're also going to have a HTTP response. That's the out direction. So we got in and now out. One is the trigger. They're both HTTP, but one's the response, of course, because we're giving something back. So let's give it a run, actually. So what's going to happen first? We're going to hit run here. I'm going to, it's got some context. It's got this name already set up for us. So let's hit run. And it's running the code. And it's going to give it something back. So it says, hello, Azure. The HTTP triggered function executed successfully, which is great. We've got the 200 requests this time because not only did we push something to a queue and it couldn't tell us if it was done or not or even started, we've got the response and we know that everything is A-OK. So let's do it again. Let's not give it a name, see what it does. We've got the other option. We've triggered the thing, but we should pass it a name as a query string or in the request body for a personalized response. Afsal, what is the use of keys under functions? Keys under functions. What do you mean by that? We've got ZLD saying, hi, Afsal, the key is to protect the endpoint. These function keys. Excellent. We will be getting to those in a minute. Love that we have people helping out in the chat. But yes, if at the moment, you could all trigger this endpoint if you have got the thing that we had in the start when we had to find the URL. So if you have the URL from this fish functions endpoint, then you can get that and you could trigger it. And if I was using a bunch of resources, you could just, well, for instance, you could just, if you wanted to cost me a lot of money, you could just start hammering it with requests and we'd be spinning up lots of functions and it would start costing me a lot of money. So you want to protect it because I don't want other people, for instance, if I have a fish tank app to be sending me a lot of spam requests and then I can't know if my fish are doing well. And also they could start making me feel like, oh, there's something wrong with my fish tank. I got to run home to check that my fish are all okay. With Balaji, will there be a backend database connected to the function? So not in this example, but you could very well do that. So this blown pathway is really just about getting the function set up and sending a response and protecting that pathway, as we were just talking about. But there's more learn pathways, and at the end, I'm going to give you a bunch of links that you can continue on to how you can connect up to that. But as we saw in the first demo example, the demo was about connecting a table to as the output. So if you configure the table, we've got these integration slots here. You can set it up to put things out to wherever you want. So we're not going to do that today, but you very much could do that. And maybe we'll do that in a later month in a different episode, because I'm very interested in these serverless options now. So we've got our new thing set up here, and we can test the function as we've just done there. But I'm also going to show you how to test it using Postman. So Postman is, let's make a new one. Postman is a way to make a HTTP request. So you can format all the headers and all the things that normally your web browser is doing when it makes a HTTP request. And you can specify the body and all those bits and pieces. So let's grab firstly our URL, get the function URL, scrolling all the way across, very wide page. We're going to pop that in there. Then we're going to start. Let's just send that first. Then we're going to give it some query parameters next up. So we've said, oh, we didn't give it a name. So in here, we can go into the params and we can say name. We can set it to my name, Renee. Don't need to put the quotes because we're not in the code. It'll handle all that for us. So we can send that off, and we can see we've just created a HTTP request. So that's super useful because we're going to secure our thing in a second. So next up, we've tested our function, and we're going to secure our function before we add all our business logic to it about our fish. That's going to start alerting us about fish that are possibly dying. So now we're getting onto the keys that we were just talking about. So we're going to go into function keys. And this is where we have all of our hidden keys, which you probably shouldn't display on a live stream. Where'd it go? Here we go. So I'm going to take this off the screen, and I'm going to copy that function key. You can all look at my horrible messy desktop while I do that. And then I'm going to hide it back. So now I have it in my copy paste clipboard. So what we need to do now is follow along here. We can now go, so we've said select function keys, and by default the function key is hidden, so we've collected that. Do we need to turn this on at any point? I don't think so. Okay, so we'll get rid of that. And now we can say, hey, we're going to pop this into our, here we go, Postman. So I'm going to pop this in my headers. So I'm going to do two things I'm going to pop in my headers. I'll do this one second so you don't have to look at my secret key. So I'll just put that down to the side. I'm actually going to set up my content type first. So this is just the kind of stuff you do to format your a post request. So we're going to do content type. It's going to auto-complete it for me. And then what we want is application JSON. So we've got one there, and then we're going to have another one, which is our X functions key. So this is the thing we want to have corresponding to that secret key that I'm not showing you all. So that's going to go in there. Then I'm going to pop off the screen, and I'm going to put that in this spot here. So that's where I'm going to put my secret key. And then I'm going to change it to a different one of those tabs. So now we don't know what is there. Okay, so something secret is in there. So now we can do the same thing, and it still has our name there. So now we can do, actually we'll change this to a post request. There we go, because that's how it's going to post that for us. Cool, okay. wondering if we've forgotten to actually turn on that it needs to be secured, because I feel like that should be something that's included. Let's have a quick peek here. We've got our keys. It just doesn't really tell us how to protect it and insist that we have the keys, which I hadn't really thought about until now, because it kind of just lets you keep on using the other things even though you might not have it. Okay, maybe this is coming up in the next part, because we'll have more business logic coming in is what we're going to have. So cool. So now we've protected our thing. We can see that how we can make our headers to add stuff to it, and add our secret key, and then we can still make the request through Postman. Just for simplicity, I'll just do the rest of them through Azure here though, because it's just right in the same window. It's just really convenient. And we can just pop this in, which will be easier to just pop in as plain text than compared to popping it into Postman necessarily. So next up, we're going to change to be about escalators. So we're going to pop this into so what do you want? We want to test and run. When we do our input, we don't want just to have name or nothing. We want to be taking in a bunch of data about what escalator it is, what the time is, and the temperature, because we're going to use business logic to decide what needs to happen, what alert needs to happen based on the temperature of the drive gear that it's measuring. So we're going to grab this. It's got a bunch of if statements just to see what the temperature is. This is obviously a small example, but you could do really anything in here that can calculate the things that are important to your business logic. So let's change index.js to be this and give it a save. And now we can run this with this new reading. Got our readings coming in. And then what happens here is we can see in our code here for each reading, we're going to go through, we're going to look at the reading temperature, and then we're going to set a status for that reading, which gets added to that context. And then we're going to return the context when we send the result back. So if we send the readings, is the readings here. So we give them back when we send the response. And then we can see each of the statuses that have come through. So we've got the readings that are okay, caution, and danger based on the business logic that we've inserted here. So next up, what do we want to do next up? I think we want to turn it into our fish-based function. I think it's time for that. So we're nearly finished off. So instead of having this all about escalators, which don't super excite me, I think it's a bit more fun to have it be about fish. So what we're going to do here is, instead of having drive gears, I'm going to have tank IDs. You can just basically make things anything you want it to be. I'm going to make this pH because we've just done temperature. Make it both lowercase just for simplicity. pH. I'm also going to change it to be a number that's a reasonable pH, because you don't want a pH of 23. That's no good. You can keep the timestamp. They can be there because that would be useful. You probably want to log something based on the time or things like that. If you want to have graphs for later, maybe you want to measure the tank, pH at different times of the day, or on days with different, temperatures outside. Who knows? Whatever you want to do. So I'm going to change these readings to be something more reasonable. Let's say 6.9. I looked up aquarium tanks, and the thing you want your fish tank to be is between 6.8 and 7.8. So we'll have a few different options in here. We'll have 6.4 and one that's really acidic for a fish. You don't want a pH of 5. It's my understanding. So now we just need to update our business logic in the function. I'm just going to make a simple update. I'm going to say, instead of just reading the temperature, we want to read the pH, and we want to see if it's below 7.8, because that's good. But we want it to be reading the pH is above or equal to 6.8. Then we also want it to be, if it's going to be, let's say, slightly outside of the range, let's pop this in. Copy paste. So if it's going to be less than 8.2, so it's, just out of the range, just above 7.8, but not too much, or just below 6.8, but not too much, we're going to say it's a caution. We're just, keeping the same caution, okay, danger things as we had before, and then everything else is going to be danger. So now we can just hit save firstly, and then we can hit run, and we'll get our new readings based on our fish data, our imaginary fish data. Is it possible to have multiple triggers on a function app? So I believe you can. It's my understanding. Thank you for the question from Learn with Shanvi. So I think you can have multiple configured in this function.js because we've got our in and our out. So I think you could, for instance, have potential like multiple. One endpoint that's you could ping via either an update to an Azure blob or an HTTP request, because maybe you want the same thing, the same reusable code to be triggered by multiple things. So great question there. And let's also say, what is the best way to run log running tasks in Azure Function apps? So I'm not super familiar with this yet, but you could easily, like if you wanted just to have your log, mostly this is for debugging information, I would say, and like kind of alerting you to things, but you would more likely want to monitor it in these monitoring settings in here. So we've got a lot of stuff going on there. And then we can run application query insights. So you've got a lot of options for seeing what's going on in here. But if you want to log your own unique things, then you could either be, you're saying run long tasks. Thank you, Jowdy, for that. Okay, if you want to run long tasks, that is a good question too. So yeah, if you want to run log tasks, you'd be looking in here for something that's already available. If you want to run long tasks, we need to think back to the start of the session. Is it too long? Is it going to outrun your 2.5 seconds that you have for 2.5 minutes that you have for HTTP requests? Or is it going to come within that? So there, kind of checking that out and making decisions about the suitability of serverless on Azure for your needs based on if you're using a HTTP endpoint as well, because the other ones are 5 or 10 minutes longer. So that was might be a bit better for you. So come on, code. We just want to look at our output before we wrap up with the slides and answer any more questions. Thank you, JRD, for being in the chat and answering questions about databases and connection strings from elsewhere, and then popping those through. So yeah, because you can really connect all the different parts of Azure up, which is really convenient and good. So yeah, you just need to get the right connection strings from different parts, and it's all good to go. So let's run that again and actually discuss our output before I jump back to the slides to give you the links to keep on going with this kind of stuff. So we can see that a pH of 6.9 is okay. As we said, it's between 6.8 and 7.8. Caution with a 6.4 and danger with 5. So get back to those fish. So that is our demonstration for today. Let me just get my notes back. Run away from me. Okay, so yeah, today we've learned how to use Azure Functions to host business logic services in the cloud, and it's a great way to host services so your solutions can scale depending on your business needs at the time. And you can also connect this to a bunch of other things, as we've discussed today. You can connect it to databases and all kinds of things that you have within Azure with connection strings. Ganesh is just asking about functions with Power BI and Synapse. I haven't actually used Synapse before, but basically if you can hit up basically an endpoint like an API with anything, this just gives you a URL which you can make requests to. So it's just making basically an API that you can use whatever way you need to use, especially the HTTP request. It's really versatile because we make HTTP requests and get responses all the time in a variety of ways. Cool. Okay, so we have a bunch of options within Azure, but also other services. So you can do things like GitHub, Event Grid, Twilio, if you want, text or phone calls, all kinds of things like that. And Microsoft Graph and Logic apps to create more complex and robust serverless workflows. And as we were saying, you can line many of them up to trigger each other, which would be cool. So you've got lots of options there. Now we're going to do the test. Everyone loves a test, right? So I'm not going to make you write your answers in the chat, but if you want to, feel free to. These are just the 3 questions you get at the end of the Learn module, and I figured I'd talk through the answers just so people have that information available to them. So here we go. Which of the following is best defines serverless logic? Code you write that doesn't run on servers, code you write that runs on servers that you manage, code you write that runs on servers and that a cloud provider manages. So take a quick second to think about what your option is there. I hope you have learnt from today that the option here that you should select is, in fact, C. It's code that you write that runs on servers that the cloud provider manages, i.e., in this instance, yes, everyone's answering C in the chat. I love it. Great engagement, everybody. Everyone gets, 100% there. So you get Azure's going to manage all that infrastructure and scaling up and stuff for you. You just have to configure what function you want to run. On to question 2. The container that groups functions into logical units for easy management, deployment, and sharing of resources is called A, resource group, B, function app, C, function collection. What do we think, everybody? These are, kind of names. Maybe we only mentioned a couple times at the start, so who knows if who's going to get it. The answer that you want is, we've got Learn with Shanvi coming in with B. We've got a few different answers coming in, a couple of B's, couple of A's. So it is actually the function group. So this one's a bit of a trick question. So the function app. The function app is the thing that had the many functions inside of it. And you still need a resource group in other things where, I don't know if this is I think this is part of a resource group because it has your different items within it. So if we go back, let's actually just pop back, see if it is in a resource group. So if we go to our home, we'll be able to see I think it might actually not be in a resource group because you normally see all of your functions in here. Yeah, no, this one is just a kind of a standalone. When you make other things, they go in a resource group because they might have storage, they might have compute resources, they might have a lot of different things, but this one is just its kind of standalone unit, which is, good to see. Really simple. So good guesses, everyone. We have a function out there. So finally, we secured our function against unknown HTTP callers by requiring a function-specific API key be passed with each call. Which of the following fields is the name header in the HTTP request that needs to contain this key? We've got X functions key, X requested with an XCSRF token. We've got Learn with Shanvi going with option A. Jack's saying there's a resource group listed right there, so I'm going to have a look back while you're all answering here. Where is your resource? I don't see a resource group. I don't know what I'm missing, but yes, let's go back. And we have got option A. Great memory, everybody. That is the correct answer. On the right, okay. On this screen, is there something on the right? Anyway, that's okay. So, but yes, the one we were talking about is kind of the subunit of something that could potentially be part of a resource group. Okay, so that's all of our session for today. We have a few more. We will have a bit of time if you have questions about how to run this workshop yourself. There are things to follow on from this workshop. There's heaps of stuff on Azure Serverless on Microsoft Learn, including how to execute Azure Functions with triggers, more different kinds of things, how to chain Azure Functions, as we were just discussing before. So using input and output bindings to have them all line up one after each other, and how to develop, test, and publish Azure Functions by using Azure Functions core tools. So making those more widely available. Here's how you can also, if you want to do this, if you're interested in an additional survey, This is one of the workshops developed for students to run. So if you want to give feedback on it, feel free to go ahead to that link. If you want to grab the links from today, they're all on the places that Sarah has been sharing. We've got one on GitHub if you like GitHub. If you want to go to my site, reneenobel.com, we've got the same resources and you can find other streams by me. If you go to the GitHub, you can go through the many other streams, not just by me, but other regional cloud advocates. But you have to dig through the GitHub. So next week, we've got another Little Learn session. That one, we're going to look at Azure Cognitive Services. We're going to make a little pen pal project. We're going to use the translation service to translate something from your language into another language. We have got calls for the links to be pasted into the chat. So Sarah will get onto that. I think she might have already done it above, but maybe you can pop it again because everyone did answer my question. So that would be great. But yeah, I'm just going to open up the comments to Sarah's just popped those ones in the chat, which is great. They're on the screen. And yeah, I just want to open up the chat to anybody who is a student or student ambassador who wants to ask any questions about how to run this workshop or anything. If you're not a student ambassador and you're not interested in finding out about that, yeah, feel free to go. But thank you for joining us on this episode today. It's really great to be with you. If you are going to duck out now. Yeah, Sarah's come back. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Renee. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll give it another minute to see if we have any student questions come through. Just in the meantime, I'll remind everyone, just if you go up a bit further in the chat, you'll be able to find all of the resources towards the beginning. So it's all the learning documents there, and you can just go straight to Renee's website as well, where you'll be able to grab them and sign up for next week's episode via the meetup page. There we go. Just had someone say thank you very much. Informative session, which is great. Thank you, everyone, for engaging in the chat today and being part of the pop quiz. We love that at the end. We should do that every week. Make sure
Always
people are listening.
Yeah, everyone's been paying attention. We can see. Yeah.
Fabulous.
So I give everyone 100%, even if you didn't get all the right answers, just for engagement. That's the kind of teacher I am. But yeah, thank you all for being here. I don't know if we're going to get any questions from students, but yeah, as I've said, I'm just getting started with Azure Serverless. So there were some really great questions that I don't know if I have answered very well. Thank you for the people who helped out in the chat as well, giving their insight into what else you can do in Azure and how you could potentially connect that up to Azure Serverless. So yeah, it's been really good, and I look forward to learning more about this as well. Thanks for the fishy learn. And good. Yeah, I hope it wasn't too fishy, like, icky fishy, but like good, themed fishy. I was a little worried calling it fishy functions. Make it seem a bit iffy, but I think having the pictures of fish is completely worth it. Yeah.
We're with you. So just to remind everyone as well that there's the on-demand version available there as well. You can watch it straight after today if you'd like to go back and reference that demo or check out any of Renee's or any of our other cloud advocates or anyone else that's presented at the Reactor, both in Sydney and globally, just on our Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. And if you guys have time to fill out the survey today with the event code 15864, that would be great. Helps us curate our future topics. So if you've some time, that would be awesome. And I think we'll finish there for today. So thank you again so much, Renee, for presenting. We will see you next week. Have a good rest of your afternoon, evening, or morning from wherever you joined us from today. And see you next time.
Bye, everybody.